congratulations, Bishop-elect Milton, and congratulations to the Imani Temple nationally and internationally. And as you heard me make a comment to Archbishop Stallings, that yes, indeed, I'm going to talk a little bit about Daniel. During the celebration, the anniversary celebration last weekend, during the High Mass on Sunday, that was Archbishop Stallings' text. He delivered the sermon, and it was relating to Daniel. Okay, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, I'm just going to take one little nugget out of that. And Brother Darcy, Apostle Bailey, thank you for joining us on Facebook. I'm going to take one little nugget out of the Archbishop Stallings' delivery. And you heard during the interview that we played just now, you heard Archbishop Stallings talk about the African American Catholic congregation and how it's taking ownership of its community. And his sermon last week really touched upon that, and that was intertwined in his discussion relating to Daniel. And the piece that stood out in that sermon was how he was speaking about how King Nebuchadnezzar, his plan to assimilate and control the best and the brightest of the Jewish people. You see, Nebuchadnezzar was not a Jew, but they had conquered Judea. They had taken over. And instead of just beating down all of the Hebrew people, Nebuchadnezzar had a plan, and that plan was to take the best and brightest of the Hebrew young folks and assimilate them into the ideologies of the Babylonians. And that plan of assimilation, a key component of that was to take their names, okay? To take their names. So their names, and I'm going to see, and I'm going to ask our family here, if you will find in the book of Daniel where they're speaking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you post it on Facebook, Apostle, if you're still looking, if you're still watching on Facebook, if you look and let me see. I'm going to take the time now to see if I can find this, because what it was that. All right. Let's see. I'm just gonna take. All right. Now we're in. All right. Here we're looking at Book of Daniel, starting in chapter 3, and that's where they're making the fiery furnace. But here we go. Look in chapter 1, Daniel chapter 1. All right. Daniel chapter 1, and this is in verse 4. Okay, and you know, I'm taking my time with this because this was a point that the bishop made, the archbishop rather. Okay, Daniel, book of Daniel, chapter 1, starting with verse 3. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, in whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were of the children of Judah, so these are the Hebrews, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. All right? So the plan of King Nebuchadnezzar, the plan was to assimilate the best and brightest of the Jewish people, those that were the best and the brightest, to assimilate them and be able to use them to control the greater Jewish population. To control the greater of the Jewish population. And one of the things that he did, he said, look, one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to change their names. See, they have these Jewish names, Daniel, Azariah. Look, we got to get rid of those names. We're going to give them some good Chaldean names. You see, so the first thing that he did was to start to inculcate in them, to start to impress within them that their identity, their names, was something that they should no longer be proud of, something they should no longer take ownership in. That these Jewish names are not good enough for you now. We're going to give you some new names. And all this kosher food that you've been eating, this Jewish food, all part of your culture. We're going to take that from you and give you something better. We're going to give you our culture. See, this was part of Nebuchadnezzar's plan on how to control the Jewish people. See, he was not going to have to put Chaldeans and Babylonians in charge of the Hebrews to try to keep the Hebrews in place. He was going to put folks that looked like the Hebrews, but thought like, ate like, had names like the Chaldeans in charge of them. You see, it was going to be easier to keep control over those Hebrews if they had another Hebrew telling them what to do. It was going to be easier for the Chaldeans to get those Hebrews to worship the Chaldean God if they had Hebrews telling them that the God that they used to worship wasn't good anymore, that they had to have a new God, this Chaldean God, this Babylonian God, to worship. You see, that struck home with me. That struck home with me. And it struck home with me because this is something with Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. That's thousands of years ago. But we see that same tactic playing out right now. You see, we see that same tactic played out 400 years ago here in the United States of America, when African slaves were brought over and their names were changed. Same thing like Daniel. Names were changed. Identity taken from them. The food that they ate no longer made available to them. The language that they spoke, all taken from them, all as a matter of control. And then just like Nebuchadnezzar did with Daniel, or tried to do with Daniel, there were some of those slaves that indeed were assimilated. Some of those house slaves that the master dressed up and let eat some halfway decent food, didn't have to work out in the sun. And those house slaves were used to control the field slaves. Now see, I'm talking about 400 years ago. But now I'm talking about 2018. We got the same thing now in 2018. But it's no longer those African slaves that are being assimilated. It's us. And when I'm saying us, I'm talking about not just black folks or Hispanic folks. I'm talking about us whose very awareness, understand what I'm saying now, whose very awareness of who we actually are is being taken away from us. That we are being divided by race, divided by religion, divided by class. Our understanding, our knowledge of who we are, our knowledge that we are all one, being taken away from us. So when we look and read in that Bible and we read about tricks that was played thousands of years ago, understand that plenty of those same tricks are being played today. Him that have eyes, let him see.